On tonight's episode of Savage Tales by the Fire, I recently came in contact with an author by the name of Steven Shrewsbury, and he said how much he liked my narrations for Savage Realms Monthly. Obviously, this made me very happy. And to show my appreciation, I recorded the first chapter of his epic Sword and Sorcery novel, THRAWL, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I have also included a magic link in the description that will take you to a location where you too can find all his works. But, as for now, I give you but a taste of Steven Shrewsbury's THRAWL. Chapter 1. Tavern Uprising. By the gods! Pull the damn sword out! The man on the floor howled out into the tavern. Although down the bar, Gorrius' ears heard him clear enough. The aged warrior looked over at the figure laying face down on the dirty boards. A man screamed in agony, while a halo of patrons surrounded him. Gorrius took a drink from his tall flagon, pulled his cloak closer, and said to the slender bartender, "The sword isn't in him, Michael." The barkeep checked the floundering man, then pointed to the swinging door. "Close that! The winter's gone, but it's still cold as teats on a celibate outside. Besides, his assailant is long gone." While a plump drunkard shambled over to shut the wooden door, Gorrius leaned out from the far end of the bar. He made sure his cowl covered his long face before saying, "And yet he bleeds." To all assembled in the smoky saloon, it appeared as if a sword lay across the whimpering man's back. When a rather jaunty, short-haired woman in dark leathers grabbed the sword hilt and winked at the bartender, Michael muttered, "Leave him be, Shaven." But she never listened. Shaven planted her boot on the long metallic mesh on the floor meant to provide sturdy footing near the bar, and with a savage jerk removed the sword away from the man's tunic. Two things became apparent. 1. No blacksmith crafted the sword in steel. 2. The drawing away ripped the clothes and flesh from the man. Shaven giggled at this revelation as a few men armed up their fallen comrade. Michael remarked to the patrons, "The constables have been summoned." Though clear to Gorrius the barkeep did this to instill calmness in the masses, many still nervously gaped at the bloody man. While a few men carried the wounded patron outside, Shaven studied the weapon and said, "It's made of wood, but with hooks, nails, and glass shards on the underside. Devious." She took a couple steps and slapped the fake blade onto the wall. The object stuck to a support beam. Shaven walked through the bits of straw matted over the metal mesh before returning to the main hardwood floor of the tavern. Hands to her slender hips, she looked back and admired her work. "A fine decoration, no?" Michael sighed, and Gorrius peered into his drink as a sense of normalcy returned to the crowded tavern. The bartender muttered, "Who ever heard of a big man wielding a fake weapon?" The aged man brooded over his drink and said, "It's a proto-sword." "A what?" "You're mistaken," said Gorrius, the hood of his overcloak receding a bit to show his coarse, matured features. "The weapon proved very useful indeed. The small objects inserted in the counterfeit sword did just what the aggressor planned. It caused shock, pain, and ultimately rent the skin off Silas's back. And again, he had some help from that sweetheart in leather over there." "Who makes such a thing? It's a savage weapon." Michael's voice trailed off as he ceased to wipe the bar down. "Barbarians? Here, in China?" His voice lowered and he scowled. "I know there are many mercenaries in Cobner City due to the rumors of war surrounding us, but hell, barbarians? They're over 1,000 miles away. Gorius shrugged, and a muffled, grinding sound emerged from his cloak. Zangus Mountain is 2,000 miles away, to be exact. But yes, that big fellow who ran out came in ill-dressed, in his breeches and garnache, which makes me think he stole them. The way I saw him fidget, he probably prefers being naked. The bartender laughed, still speaking so only Gorius could hear him. Perceptive of you. My eyes aren't as good as they used to be, kid. Fingers drumming on the bar, Michael said, I never saw a barbarian run from a fight that easily. His eyes narrowed at Gorius, taking in his great size. Certainly a large man for these parts. Didn't you see him? After a nod, Gorius responded. Maybe he wasn't here to fight, but to pay attention. A barbarian spy? That's a swill jest. I haven't heard much of the barbarians on the move since the army of Nosmada tangled with them a few years back. Before that, it was the old fable of Legaul, slaying the Nephilim in the Zanghos Mountains. Michael pointed to Garius' flagon. You need another one, old-timer? Sure, youngster. The slouching man agreed, and pushed gold toward the server. While Michael definitely wasn't a young man, his withered face smiled at the name the ancient brute called him. Voices bombarded Gorius as he drank from the full flagon. The drunks paid him little mind as he slumped over his drink, but their conversations rang in his sharp ears. Blood! I'm sick to freaking death of hearing about blood all the time. 'Cause no matter how much damn blood the priests, holy or not, surrender up, it's never enough to appease the gods or devils. Another voice said, I heard tell no amount of sacrifice can stop these uprisings of the dead. Bugger me, all this necromancy afoot, with a bloody war brewing as well. Makes my ass chew crackers. Shavon shot back. You besotted idler. The dead arise and drink the blood of any and all takers. Then walk like fools to the south. Her boots clicked on the floor as she spoke. Even the guards around the Foundry of Sin never have to draw steel to kill a leech. They walk on past, no loss. Michael wrung the bar rag and murmured, Aside from the idea of barbarians nearing the curtain wall of Kabnur, that leech circumstance is the craziest thing I ever saw. Or my name ain't Michael Gallinson, and it is. Gorius shot back. You want an award, raw-boned man? Buy yourself some steak to feed that body of yours, and you might not be deemed food for the risen dead. Michael chuckled in good humor as he pointed at a man in the far corner of the bar. We get all kinds. You see that one there? The tall man with dark hair, who looks too clean to even have been dirty. He just comes in here to read parchment every so often. He never drinks. Gorius glanced at the person indicated, and then looked back at his slurry brew. That's Ezran Gavriel. He wouldn't be drinking. You must know everyone, or have a ready answer for anything, old-timer. Is he a spy or some kind as well? Gorius shook his head. No, not really. Ezran watches a lot, though. The bastard never gets any older, either. The talks around them went on. They say there's a blue dragon afoot in the northeast, screaming his lungs out beside the great rivers of Gemini. They say it flounders in the cursed desert of Dundayan by the ruins of Larrick. Shavon cursed the speaker. Javid, you are drunk and dense. A lethal combination, however, not an uncommon vintage. Javid continued. It's said the cult of the dragon used a fragment of the Daemonolateria in the resurrection of that dreaded creature. I heard tell they are around here, too. Many guffaws echoed, and more people told him he was loaded. Yet a few agreed with Javid's words. One man across from him slobbered as he spoke. "They say not all the swords in the foundry of sin could penetrate the dragon's flesh." In the far left corner of the saloon sat an enormous persona, twice the size of any man, drinking from an enormous pitcher. At the mention of the foundry of sin, the ogre lifted one deformed eyebrow, but kept drinking. Every so often he inhaled from a hose attached to a tall ceramic tube, smoldering at a spot low in its construction. A different male voice thundered in the ears of Gorius. "Ah, that's a damnable fairy tale! Demonolateria! Fa! My sore ass in a sling! Besides, the last of the blue dragons was slain by Gorius Legal. Damn, what must be 30 or 40 years ago. I heard he gutted and fed the thing to the folks in the village of Oliverian." Many grumbling voices agreed on this point, and the ogre added in a bottomless voice, "That was about when the first of these accursed leeches were spotted. No?" Siobhan chattered with mirth. "Gorius Legal. He's but a fairy tale, like dragons as well. It's tough to accept one man could slaughter a dragon, be he a keen fighter like Gorius Legal was supposed to be or not. Think of how silly that is." She spoke on in strident tones. "Could all the axes they crafted in the foundry of sin be enough to butcher a giant beast like a dragon? That's lunacy. Seeing the platelet flesh dragons bore, right?" She waved her thin hands in the heavy smoke and pointed at the corner. "You, ogre, are you not Mitra, the foreman of the foundry?" The massive individual only grumbled, blowing smoke from its nostrils, thus giving a command in the affirmative. Mitra swirled the settlings of his pitcher and demanded more drink. Michael motioned for a serving woman to attend the ogre and whispered, "That gal will get the business end of old Mitra Stillwell's wrath if she prods him enough. Dragons. Ha!" Gorius closed his eyes, dreamt of the way the ice of the northern lands used to stiffen his beard. His back ached, and he recalled how the cold treated his bones then. He also remembered the sounds of a dragon's scream, filtering down his ears and into his spine. Motioning for another round from Michael, he noted the short-haired girl in leathers left the ogre alone. As he set down another drink, Michael gazed toward the table in the corner, opposite Mitra, in the crowded mead hall. Cursed kids these days, they know not of which they speak. The grizzled drinker gave a fatigued shrug and put the mug to his lips. Before ingestion, Gorius said, "They walked in here wearing blades. I never saw a kid carry a curved sword like that mouthy assassin does." Michael blinked, confused. "Siobhan? An assassin? How did you spot such a thing in the dim firelight? Didn't know you would care for such a matter, old one. Seldom do folk come into the Aragon barroom with such keen senses. Hell, they sure don't leave with them. Why do you think I keep my back to the wall here, and not to the saloon main floor? That's why that screaming fool was hauled out of here. He turned his back on the big barbarian he started a fight with. I thought maybe it was the brace you wear. I see you never take off your backpack and scratch at it under your leather jerkin. I figured you propped yourself up there to rest." Gorius felt the stiff portions of the long bundle and inner brace on his sore back. "Astute of you. Do you want a medal?" He shot a glance at Ezron, who still read. "How in hell did you come by the name of Michael?" The man rubbed his thin black beard and giggled. "My mama said it was after the Archangel." "Huh. I doubt you're his son. You would be taller." Gorius gazed back across the smoky cavern, and Ezron Gavril met his stare. The man at the bar returned to his drink. Siobhan pranced in her tan leather boots and shouted,
"You all carry on about Legal as if the children of demons didn't invent him. They do that to bestow false hope on this besotted realm." She slammed her fist down on the table to gain the complete attention desired. "If Gorius lived, wouldn't he be fighting the resurrected dead men of Nosmada? Or offering his services to the local tribal kings? They're out there gathering up every mercenary they can, in fear of Nosmada's army trekking past Kabnor. These chieftains, they have secret plans and lives they need silenced in their schemes. They never sent out word for an old legend. They sent for me."
Gorius eyed Michael, half smiling, and his server whispered, "That's Shavon from Politi. She had been through here before, but you said she was an assassin?" "Yeah." "How do you know that?" "Silence is not her strong suit," Gorius said, "but I can see by the embroidery of her boot tops that she attained them afar off, not on this continent. Aside from that and the way she moves, Shavon smells of amber hash. I noticed it when I walked past her. All the opiates the ogre is inhaling cannot hide the scent of the amber lilies of the Caliph of Damavand. He's the father of an assassin's cult. That mouthy gal reeks of it. That's how they pay their trainees. Keep them plied at first." Stunned at this revelation, Michael said, "Damavand? Isn't that far off? But hell, that's wild. Do you think she got that curved blade in the east?" Gorius frowned. "I hear in the underground factory at Sin, they can make a mock-up of any weapon. She doesn't look road rough enough to have traveled that far. Her gait, her complexion, all too fresh." Mitra Stillwell again grumbled, but only to motion for more drink. From under his table scurried a tiny man, smaller than a dwarf, but dressed in the same fashion as Stillwell. The small man adjusted his loose braised pants, relit the bowl of the long tube, and ran to the bar. Michael drafted Stillwell a drink. "From what Shavon declares openly, she's here at the request of the local magistrate, Lyra Ran. There's some devilry afoot with a group of young cultists. Rumor is the local youths pray to the images of Nosmada, dark son of man from—" "I know who Nosmada is," Gorius snapped, his gaze on the ogre, then to Ezran, and then back to the bar. The scurrying servant returned to Stillwell with the pitcher. After adjusting the rather feminine barbette on his tiny head, the lackey vanished under Mitra's table. Shavon threw up her arms and clucked. "I heard the tales of Gorius Legal from my youth. His 2 swords with such moves." She mocked a man fighting with 2 blades. "I knew them from my cradle on. They are stories, nonetheless, from a forgotten age, like lies told of one god when we know there are thousands." The man across the table from her shot back. "You should mind your tongue, girl. Show more respect. Gorius Legal came from north of here." Shavon drew out a dirk and stabbed it in the table near the hand of the man who shouted at her. "I accept no quarter from a man who insults me, Arius." She gripped the edges of the table with both hands. "If you can grab it before me, you can have myself for the night." The entire tavern quieted and turned to face her. Gorius winced as he straightened up. Even Ezran took time from his reading to look over at Arius, facing Shavon. Michael glanced at Gorius when he stood up straight and towered over the room. Across from Shavon, the patron, Arius, shook off the cling of his grimy clothes and grinned. He removed his woolen cap and grabbed the sides of the table. Arius
licked his lips, and Shavon's eyes glowed by the flames of the hearth.
"She'll murder him,"
Gorius said casually, and put down his drink.
"He'll rise from the dead tomorrow to join the unholy horde of Nosmada, unless they burn his filthy ass. I'd bet another round on it."
No sooner had Gorius spoke than Arius made a play for the dirk. The woman moved, but not toward the table. Shavon reached toward her left forearm and came out with a tiny curved blade. As Arius raised the dirk triumphantly in the air, Shavon sliced his neck clean across. Arius' smile remained stuck in place as his throat gaped open, vomiting out blood on the gaming table. "So much for those cards," Gorius quipped. Mitra Stillwell smiled and drank, coughing on some of it. His minuscule servant peered out from his cover, then returned to his spot under the table. "I'll take that," Shavon said with a grin, snatching the dirk from the dying man's grasp. Arius fell over the table, sending bloody cards to flight, and the room gasped for the most part. She bent close to his ear, whispering, "Was it as fine as you thought?" as Shavon cackled loud. Gorius faced the door to the mead hall. It lay 20 feet away. He stepped forward, never picking up his walking staff. Wiping his boots on the mesh on the floor, he moved from the bar with some speed. Shavon stepped into his path. Her trim frame lolled back on her right hip, arms folded. She stood about halfway to the door and giggled. "What are you trying to do, old wretch? Run home to your fat woman now? Are you that faint at the sight of blood?" "I'm just trying to get to the door, sister." Gorius planted his feet square to his shoulders. His hood fell back, and a great mound of graying locks spilled out around his craggy, long face. He loomed over her, cutting an imposing figure. Mitra Stillwell put down his pitcher. The tube fell from his lips. "Goodness!" Shavon cooed, unafraid, her left boot heel tapping. "You must have been quite a man once." "Yeah, well, it still works, even if my back doesn't much," Gorius said as he put coins on the bar, wearing no expression of concern for the killer in front of him. Shavon didn't move as she pouted. "You're either courageous or too stupid to realize your danger, elderly fool. Do you know who I am?" "Does it matter? The whorehouse is down the street." "You are drunk," she laughed. "And you are really ignorant, sister. Funny thing is, though, I'll be sober come daylight." Her eyes flared, and the tavern drew a collective breath. "Why, you insane duffer, do you know who is going to slay you?" "Doesn't matter." Gorius glanced at Ezran Gavriel. "Deliverance will come." A few in the bar spit their drinks at his words, and Mitra coughed loud, almost laughing. But she ignored all of this and went on to say, "I have traveled far and wide. I have killed everything that walks or crawls. I have—" In the middle of her great boast, Gorius hunched over while he braced himself on his knees. No one paid this much mind, not even Shavon. So weak went his movements. Surprise took her completely when he dropped to the floor like a cat, seized the long straw-covered mesh under her boots, and yanked back. The crude rug ripped from under her pointed heels, and she flipped backwards. After her rump rolled over her head, she hit the floor on all fours, stunned, braced, and laughing at what happened. But as she fell, he reached his hands just under his waist to the bottom of the stiff backpack. From out of slots came 2 blades, each near to 3 feet in length. Since he stood quite tall and his pack so long, he easily concealed the 2 sword scabbards. When he stepped forward, he swished the swords, lancing the smoke in the air, then driving them down on either side of Shavon's braced form. The blades sliced clean through her arms at the elbow joints. She slammed these bloody stumps into the floor, gasping in shock. The rest of the bar hissed a name that made her look up at her slayer.
Lagal!
Over her towered the ancient warrior, the fabled himself, Gorius Lagal. His eyes stared at her more in pity than anger. Her crimson blood dripped from legendary blades that gleamed brighter than steel should. She watched him turn the blades down and hold the 2 swords like daggers, knuckles side by side.
You're not real. I thought you were dead,
she choked, tears streaming from her brown eyes. Not quite yet, sister. Do you think I've lived so long on strength alone? If you would have gotten old, you would have known to save the talking for after the fight. With that, he planted his blades in her back, pinning Shavon's heart and lungs to the wooden floor. This action made the crowd grunt, then fear to breathe again. The thud rang with finality. While he snuffed, he broke the silence with the scuff of his boots. After he stepped on her neck and pulled his swords out, he wiped the blood on her short hair and said, "Which way is that whorehouse, Michael? It has been quite a spell since I last visited the one in Copnor." The door to the mead hall opened, and 2 men stepped in with drawn swords. By the insignia on their black leather coats, Gorius figured them members of the constable's guard. At last they answered the summons for the man injured by the barbarian emissary. Lagal looked at the amazed patrons, then to the giant ogre who arose from his bench. Beyond the men, from outside, Gorius spied Ezran Gavriel, smiling. He never recalled seeing Ezran leave the bar. Looks like I will have to go later.